Game 10. I don't know what to say. To be honest, it's short game and very boring. Maybe the first game that it happens to be very boring throughout the match. There was not much happening. The game was short, so it didn't make a lot of sense to me. So let's dive in. We had Ding with white pieces after the rest day, and he had D4, knight of 6. Before actually making the next couple moves, I believe they had the rest day, and Dink had, there was like 5 games remaining at the time, and he had three white pieces that he had, and one of them is like today. So I felt like he could play the London, but active line, active ideas, make use of the white pieces right now because the games are really like almost, you almost have 4 or 5 games. There's no room for mistakes. Maybe you should try to find ways to try to win. I mean, should one player able to win, they would have a higher chances to become whether it's Ding or Ucash, they have higher chance to win the match because there's only like 4 games left or 5 games. So I felt like Ding could have pushed a little bit hard to try to put some pressure on you, Cash, because maybe once this is equivalent to the first game. Like you're starting to get into the match, you were kind of nervous. Maybe you are more nervous right now. Should you make a mistake, it might cost you the match. So it's just it felt like today's game. Like when I watched it live, I was sleeping throughout the match, throughout the game, and there was nothing going on actively. We could see the remaining of the move or the game itself. You guys would know exactly what I mean. Knight f3, d5. We had a London. And then e6, we had e3, and c5. I think we had this London before. It was at least it was exciting when Ding played it. He had this preparation. He castled long. I felt like we were likely to see something similar today. Some ideas. But we had bishop e2 and then bishop d6 and then takes. This actually feel like the bishop moved twice, but it's okay. We had c4, and then I think we had castles, and then knight c6, and then knight c3, and then takes. You look at this position, this may feel like, like some kind of queen's gambit with the bishop being on f4. But it still remains a London, I think, but it feels pretty symmetrical. I mean, you look at this position, you look at the pawn structure, right? Very symmetrical. Just like white pawn structure, very symmetrical. So I mean, there's not much going on. Pretty boring. Ukesh is more than capable of drawing this game with black. Not much ideas. I mean, after bishop takes c4, we had knight h5. This may be a way to play on. Usually around here, I think the database was giving like a6. So here's a little bit of an issue for black. Is usually the bishop is how you develop the bishop. So a6 is one way to play b5 and maybe bishop b7. There was also like you could trade here and then simply do this, and then b6 is one of the ways you could play that. I feel like this is still possibly a draw. The bishop on c8 would likely to move soon, and there's not much going on, even though rook is sitting on d1. Ukesh tried to make it exciting a little bit by playing knight h5, which actually is within his style. He doesn't want to like trade queens. He's looking for more imbalances, if there's any actually. So he's looking to try to trade down f4, have the bishop pair, and then he may prove that the bishop pair for him may make use of the long term. I actually felt around here that there's one way white could play, like possibly trade queens, something like this, bishop here, and then some kind of rook d7, bishop e5. The point being is white is trying to say, I could play the knight on e4. The knight is sitting on h5 is maybe not well placed. Should you take here, knight takes? You may argue, well, we have the bishop pair, for black, but white may have better placement with the pieces. You may claim also the knight is sitting on h5. That's like I mentioned a minute ago or a few seconds ago. This may be a way to play for white. And then still the bishop on c8 is not fully developed yet. I felt like this is one way to play. I actually felt like this is what's going to happen. This is the only way that white could find some kind of imbalance this way. However, we had bishop g5, and I felt like this is okay. There's some games in the database. I mean, it's really hard to see that black is in trouble or anything. I mean, especially after this move. There was also some ideas. Knight e4, could it be considered knight e4 right now? But you might give the bishop pair, and it's not clear if this is a good idea for white. I feel like knight e4 is one of the ideas, but you know, why should you give the bishop pair and you could double up the pawns? Even though it's okay for white, but this doesn't necessarily give him any kind of ideas to play on, you know, long term. So I felt like around here, we had bishop e7, and then we have knight e4 now. Should you take this way, then, you know, you have something going for white. So after takes here, the queen is attacking on h5, the knight. Should this happen, though, something like here, takes, here, and then king g7 to protect the pawn at f6, then you have rook c1, and now white is completely good. This is something that you have an advantage. You could see why. White have the better rook. You know, the double pawns for black, and also the bishop is not developed, the bishop on c8. However, you're not going to get this from Gukesh. It's not going to happen. The best idea is just going back. You could say that, you know, black wasted some moves here. It's okay because he's actually countering on e4, and he's just, you know, forcing matters to try to trade down pieces. And once you trade down pieces, you know, things are really pretty boring. There's not much going on. Far from rocky, you know. Ding is not rocking this match at all. There's nothing going on. I think after knight f6, the only thing that white could do maybe takes, giving up the bishop here, but maybe something like queen c2, have the better rooks maybe. Even this one is not clear. I mean, maybe bishop e7 and then, you know, but maybe some ideas, you know, rook here, rook c1, and then it becomes a little bit of play for white. I felt like this is the only way to play. However, we had the most boring version in this game, the most strange. We had knight here, and I started to sleep after this move because I felt like, you know, after knight here, it's like basically this is a draw offer by Ding. The reason it's a draw offer is everything is like okay for black. He's just trade, more pieces traded down. So after trade queens, there's nothing going on for you. If you guys remember, the rook was active on d1. We had lines where you could play here, and now it's just the black rook is sitting on d8 already here. So there's just not much going on. Even though the double pawns here is not a big deal. Now, after a rook move, you know, the bishop could start moving. And that's the right way to play bishop here. But then bishop e8. h7 could be a weakness in the endgame, but not in a position like this. Honestly, like the double pawn, the pawn at h7, it's not in a position like this where you could win. There's not an effective way you could attack the pawns or anything. Black is just basically drawing the game quite easily. Nothing to worry about. You could have got this situation somehow with the queens on, but you know, it's a little bit too late here, of course. And then we have bishop here, and then rook takes. Very boring stuff. King f1, king g7, and then a3. So white may be trying to put all his pawns in dark squares, maybe g3. So when you see your opponent has a bishop, and if you know, let's say white bishop right now, which Gukesh have on e8. It makes sense to put all your pawns in dark squares so they're not attacked by the bishop. It's fine. It's a fine idea, but it's not a winning idea per se. Like, it's not going to achieve anything in a position like this. They're just making moves at this point. So f5, king u1. They are move 20, 21. They cannot offer a draw here, and they have to make moves. So I felt like, you know, they were playing relatively fast. I don't disagree with this. The position is like completely doesn't make sense. Strategically, this is easy draw between two grandmasters. Even below that, it's easy to play below. So bishop e2, knight here. You may not need to go. This is the reason why. I mean, first of all, this could happen, and if this were to happen, this is actually the sequence. I feel like this is actually what they could play for. But there's another way. There's another problem here. Gukesh doesn't have to play this move. He may try to play for this, try to trap the rook. But again, this didn't happen. We had G3. So again, Ding is putting all the pawns in dark squares, and we had this next move, and then almost instant move by Ding. He just takes pretty much a draw, and especially after knight d2, the knight would simply jump here. You could visualize knight c4 already here, just trying to trade more pieces, and absolutely here there's nothing. You could argue, say that there are some weakness. The pawns are in light squares. I don't think the pawn's gonna, even if they sit right here, there's no way you could attack them anyway. Even if they sit there for entire game, you're not gonna attack them at all. There's not enough pieces here for white to do anything. But black could also put his pawns in dark squares. I mean, I could see that the pawns could go like h6, b6. The king could start moving here, and this is actually what kind of happened. f6, and then all the pawns are going to be, most of the majority of the black pawns going to be in dark squares anyway. So it's easy to play this. So we have it b6 here, king e7, king c3, king d6, b4, f6, king d4, and then these just start h6. So most of the pawns are in dark squares. Black could even do e5 next move, and even though f5 is the only pawn that in the light squares, but you could never win it. So we had bishop here, bishop there, bishop here, bishop there, and we had like a repetition even before move 40. I don't know what to tell you. Very boring draw. It's like very different from the previous games where the draws were really like, it was competitive draws. Like it was long games, even if it's not like, after move 40, but it's still like competitive games. It was like well-deserved draws, and both players were trying to go for some kind of activity throughout the games. This is no activity at all, and I don't know, like what you would see. This is maybe okay in the first, like this may have been like game 4 or something, game 2, game 3 maybe, this quick draw, this kind of stuff. But we are game 10, things are finishing up. We are marching into like game 14, and so you expect that this would happen early on, not so much in game 10. So you expect a little bit of ideas to happen. Both players are trying to prove that they could win the match straight up. I actually feel like Ding is looking for tie breaks. There's no question about this. I mean, when you play like this for White's perspective, you play a London lame line, and then you draw quickly, and then you try to hang on with Black. I don't know if this is really a good thing. You may not force the tie breaks. There are concerns that maybe now Gukesh. So let me put it this way: Gukesh know that tie breaks may not favor him. I'm not even sure about this one. Maybe he could play it, and maybe he could win on tie breaks. I don't know why we are saying he cannot. Given the experience of Ding, Ding may have the upper hand, but we never know. I mean, we could see a quick blunder, some kind of new idea where Ding has to think about it, and then he might just be like not playing the best moves. Who knows? I think Gukesh would have to start like really going effectively with the white pieces to find, like next game 11, Gukesh would have white. The real question though, which opening to play? If you play e4. So here's the thing. I think if e4 is... So I believe Gukesh and his team are going to work on a specific line on the French, then maybe try to win. They may be trying to find a way against it, should e4. But actually, I don't know if Ding will play e6 again. There's a potential of, maybe like e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Ding is able to change like with one black, like to try to get like a Petrov, where maybe it becomes something that he could try to draw. I don't know his history with a Petrov. I think he did play it before. He may do this. He may feel like, try to play some lines. Petrov is pretty effective opening, but also White has ideas on his own. We could see some, strong game from the Petrov if the Petrov is being played. But, Ding may also be going to the French. I'm just giving an ideas out, like, should Gukesh play e4? It wouldn't surprise me if we have an e5. But also, maybe Ding is avoiding any kind of theory. A lot of theory, maybe he would just play like a Petrov, even though there are a lot of series in the Petrov, but maybe he's going for more effective ways to try to draw for black, and maybe avoiding the Relopez and the Italian, because maybe this is where he could get surprised by kind of a novelty there. Or he could play the French. The choice is between maybe a Petrov or, some kind of French again. Or Gukesh could argue and say we could play d4. Play d4 and then, maybe try the Catalan again, which I don't know if it's a good idea. Or he could play Queen's Gambit. So you're looking at Queen's Gambit with White. It's going to be interesting for the next game, to be honest. The next game is maybe the most critical in the game, most critical game in the match, because now Gukesh may be trying a little bit harder. You also have to be careful with, if you are Gukesh, you don't want to overpress, because if you do overpress and try to win just to avoid tie breaks, what could happen is you might be, it might backfire, especially with Ding. So you want to take some risks, but it's not like high risks. You didn't lose a game just to try to go all in. You don't have to have this mentality yet. If you were to lose a game, then maybe it makes sense to play any opening and try to go after your opponent. Try to find new ideas and try your best. But however, I think my own opinion, the next game would be more telling to see if Gukesh, maybe he's nervous, maybe he wants to take an early draw too. It wouldn't surprise me. Don't rule out a potential of London. Maybe Gukesh is absolutely nervous and maybe he could try to get some idea, try to draw the game, and then make use of White at the very end, try to play e4. So there are mind games could happen because the games are coming to an end. Both players are maybe preparing something at the very end to surprise each other. Maybe like Ding, maybe he would surprise us by some kind of like a prepared line at the very end. Not this game, maybe the next game. Who knows? We would like to see an effective game, like really a game with all ideas. Long game even, it's okay. Was competitive game between both players. I think we're gonna see this the next game. It wouldn't surprise me if we have a win next game. It could be a win for Gukesh or a win for Ding, actually. Both players might try, and that would lead us to a strong game, and that's what we're always looking for. So hopefully we would have a strong game, in the next couple hours, and it would be effective to do a recap for that. And stay tuned for more game reviews, folks. I will see you guys later. Take care.